Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis, LA and dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello.
Hello, could I please speak with Nicola Cooperus and Adam Lee Miller?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, well, what a pleasure to have you both on the phone. Thank you so much for taking our call, and I'm so glad you could be part of the Quarantine Tapes.
Well, thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for both being there. It's quite extraordinary for me to be speaking to two people at one time, and particularly in these quarantine times where I'm speaking to one person at a time, and you form a unit. So the notion of isolating yourself as a unit, I'd love you to talk about how you can be alone and yet together.
Well, we are kind of like one person.
Really?
And I could also just leave the room and then.
No. I please do not speak. I'd like you to both speak, perhaps not exactly at the same time, but to answer that question. I'm curious. I'm curious what it might mean to be two and to be one, particularly in this context now.
I mean, it's been such a long time that we really don't think about separation of self much anymore. We even have been discussing, we do visual arts as well, and we have a show that is quarantine stuck in at Rhodes College in Memphis right now that we can't deinstall because no one's allowed to travel. But that show we've been discussing even when we do what we used to call individual work, which would be Nicola's photography and my painting. We're now saying that there's really no individual in those either, because when I'm making a painting, I'm constantly asking her for her opinion and making changes based on things she said, and vice versa with the photography. So I would say one of the ways it works is because we live in Detroit. We do have one of those large homes that outsider artists can afford. So we have space to get physically away from each other. But it's not really a thing we really ever think about.
Right.
Actually, from everything I understand, you might have space to get away from each other, but at moments you choose actually to live in extreme and close proximity with no windows in an underground space, confined, creating for yourself a way of being where you can't escape.
Yeah, I was just thinking it would be pretty funny to go into one of these places that has isolation tanks and ask them if they had one for two.
Well, I hope people are hearing this program and maybe calling you.
Yes.
I mean, the notion of isolating yourself is not unfamiliar to you at all. It's something you've done for quite some time. When I proposed this program to dublab, the Quarantine Tapes, because I'm a quotomaniac by profession, I remembered this wonderful line of Blaise Pascal, which he must have written 400 and some years ago in Les Pensées, where he says, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. How does that strike you?
We were actually just speaking about that this morning because I don't know where I have a quote as well, but I don't have it right in front of me or memorized, but it's Camus talking about Heidegger saying that anxiety, everything comes from anxiety. Our beginning of consciousness, everything. And we were talking about anxiety. It's a topic we speak about a lot in the music. And I was stating that completely relates to why these protests are starting to happen. These are people that cannot sit in a room quietly alone.
That's interesting.
They're having to examine their life for the first time. There's no diversions.
There's no shopping.
And they can't. They would rather risk their lives than have to risk this contemplation.
I love this. I love this moment, by the way, of your Nicola. The way you came in by saying "and no shopping." that was a beautiful kind of footnote to that moment.
Thank you.
I like the fact that you said thank you when I was actually speaking to Nicola. This is great.
Maybe we actually have been spending too much time together. We finished each other's sentences and parts of sentences. I don't even know where it stops, where it begins.
There is a song by Moustaki, a French singer I very much liked growing up, which has that line, "Je ne sais pas où je commence, je ne sais pas où tu finis. I don't know where you begin, I don't know where I end." So it has a wonderful resonance. But I think it's so interesting what you were saying, Adam, about these demonstrations. Obviously, there's a political reason for them too, which we really should not be overlooking. But the notion that Pascal now is speaking very loudly to the fact that the demonstrators are unable to stay in their rooms, or differently put, as you said, I think quite accurately, they don't want to stay in their room because then the anguish of being might have to be examined.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so going back to the isolation, for people listening that don't know, we just released our 8th album last week, but on our 7th album, what we did is we went to a cabin in the woods in northern Michigan on Lake Huron in February for over a month, and we wrote our demos up there. And it was getting down to -14 at night, or during the day.
Yeah.
And the lake was freezing. We would take walks every day, but we had like really heavy snowsuits on. Watching, not only is there's 2 feet of snow on the ground, but then as the lake continues to freeze farther and farther out, it just becomes even more and more isolating. And there were moments that it really did feel exactly like.
We would go for days and days and days without seeing another human.
Days,
weeks.
Why? I mean, I feel like saying, how long have you had this problem? But why? Why choose? Why choose this? I mean, I know you have an answer for it, but I'm curious. And in the literary world, there's a whole movement, the Oulipo, that chose rules for writing. For instance, Georges Perec wrote a whole book without the letter E. So why these constraints? I think it's interesting. The constraints obviously produce something that without the constraints wouldn't happen.
Well, I mean, one is we are touring musicians. So, you go on the road and that's a totally different lifestyle. It's day after day after day, city after city. It's
very public. Even the hotel rooms, we have people staying in our room, that's part of our small crew. And
so it's very rewarding, but it's also very mentally exhausting. And so I think there's a certain, freedom that you get. It's like we all have to at some point cocoon and like replenish. We need nourishment. And so I do feel like by isolating yourself, there's something where, there's no outside distraction of chatter, and you can really focus on what you're doing, and you can let your thoughts just kind of move from this to that without any other interference. So, but we also, on our sixth album, we did a project. We won a grant from the Knight Foundation, and we made a record called sixth album called Detroit House Guests, where we invited 6 musicians to individually come and live with us for 2 to 3 weeks. So that was a very public album. It was, the writing process was wonderful, but also incredibly exhausting. Adam and I have after 23 years now of working together, we have a system of work, the way we work with one another that isn't exhausting. So I think, a lot of this self-isolating has just come from life, I guess.
As a reaction to the life you sometimes have to live. I was wondering now, as touring musicians, if you at this moment miss a touring.
Well, I mean, we're actually supposed to start a 33 show, 44 date U.S. North American tour May 1st. So we're in a very liminal period right now where we were actually we were rehearsing and getting ready. We were starting to get merchandise made and really getting in the mindset to go out on the road. And then, week by week, the tour just kept getting smaller and smaller and crunched, canceling dates, postponing dates. And so, now we feel probably the oddest we've ever felt.
Yeah, and especially because before, and as you were pointing out, so on this new record, we did the opposite of this behavior, the Cabin in the Woods record, and it was a very beautiful record, but you couldn't go outside. But the view was gorgeous, and Nicola decided that she wanted this new record to be about perception, and so we painted a 20 by 20 section of our basement, all black, including the floors. And during the summer, worked in almost complete blackness. I mean, we had the lights on low. We had to see the keys and whatnot. But if I had known that there was going to be a pandemic coming, I would not have I would have done a very public way of working on the demos for that record. So yes, it's been very difficult to navigate the emotions of losing the tour when you had planned to be in isolation to then be very public, but then to go from isolation to even deeper isolation is very hard to navigate and confusing.
It's fascinating to read about that album, because months ago you were thinking of your album Perception is as of Deception, as one filled with dance songs for a cultural breakdown. And now you, like everybody else, is living through a breakdown. Not everybody necessarily thinks it's a cultural breakdown, and I'd love you to talk about that. So how can a different meaning sink in when phrases are repeated together with music rather than spoken on their own? And for instance, from Total Damage, you have deception is perception, deception as perception, deception of perception, perception is deception, they persuade you.
Very nice.
Nicely put, no? With my accent.
Yeah, I like it.
It's fantastic.
Maybe you can come on stage with us once we go on tour.
Please call me.
It's very weird because absolutely when we were working on the album and I was writing those lyrics, I was just feeling very frustrated with culture and where has culture been going and how is social media affecting culture, and just like how the things we see out there in the world, like, do we really know those things? Like, how much do our eyes deceive us? And then it's so strange to then suddenly go into this pandemic where it still means absolutely the same thing, but maybe just more about the people who are heading the terrible state of affairs, and less about culture, but more, about how we really are getting the wool pulled over our eyes, and we're not really getting the true picture of what's going on. And it's very sad. And you just feel like helpless at times. Like, what can we do? And I think then it just leads to total damage. You're just completely frustrated.
One of the things I've always admired in Nicola's lyric writing is that her work can be very personal. I don't ask her what the work means unless something doesn't sit right with me and I need to know. But she's always had a way of having lyrics that can mean something personal, something current, and something universal. And what another thing about total damage that I've been realizing as we were doing the music video is there is a really sad part to the song, and there's a really aggressive part of the song. And I think that's been the hardest thing for us and most artists that we speak to, and most people we speak to, is navigating that sadness versus that anger. And that was, obviously nothing when that was being written last May that we knew we were going to be living through.
Nicola, I mean, both of you, I should address you both, but I'm curious if you could say a little bit more, unpack a little bit further the notion of sadness. I like silences like this so much.
I mean, it's weird because I'm generally not a sad person. I mean, I'm generally optimistic, which is strange. But I feel like the sadness that's in that song, even the sadness that everybody thinks the record is so, what is the word that a lot of people have been using?
Like a release, a dancey release.
Yeah. And to me, I always find that there is like always a certain sadness undertone in a lot of the work we do. I mean, there's also a lot of humor and sarcasm, but maybe it's more that it's like a bleak humor.
Like a Dr. Strangelove humor.
Do you know where the word sarcasm comes from?
No, I don't, actually. Do you, Adam?
No.
Greek origin.
Pray tell.
Greek origin. It means actually sarkasmos. It means to bite in the flesh.
Wow.
Nice.
I'm filled with such extraordinarily useless information.
What is that?
I'm filled with so much useless information. Whenever you need it, just call up and
I think that's great.
I'll give you other etymologies. I'm curious about this notion of sadness, and I was also very intrigued to read your interest in what I take to be a revisiting of surrealism. I think of Cocteau in particular. You say that you would like culture to stay or to remain weird, for the underground, in some sense, to remain weird, and which of course is complicated, I think, in a commodified and instrumentalized world, and
right.
in a world that is you said no shopping in a world that is driven by the market. So I'm curious if you can articulate what you mean by culture remaining or staying weird, and what what you're doing to try to keep that torch of weird culture alive.
I mean, it's such a difficult question to answer on many facets and in a short amount of time.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean, I look at it like, since a young teenager, always, being into punk, whatever you want to call that, and like the whole idea of sellout and what does that mean. And, it's always been a thing of that, like the true artist, I don't know how to say this, like there's a lot of taking from the underground and a lot of, a lot of artists become stepping stones for other ideas, for bigger ideas. And there's kind of two worlds that exist. There is like the underground, and then there's mainstream in many different things. And, it's hard because I understand like everybody has to make a living, and we're not all trust fund people. And, we have to, right? We have to figure out.
Not all.
We're not all.
There are exceptions.
But we have to figure out a way that we can remain true to our art, to our craft, what we do, and what our ethos are, and what our desires are, without sort of becoming commodified or like sort of taken over. I guess I just feel like I've watched a lot of people get eaten up by.
There was a moment in 2004 after our second album came out, and we were getting more popular than we were comfortable with, and so were our friends, and people we knew, or just associates, or compatriots, whatever word is right.
Colleagues,
that's the word. And we decided to stop playing live for a year because we wanted to become less popular, because we could just kind of see the machine that was coming at us. And other colleagues didn't. And it's interesting to this day to look at where different people are on their artistic side, if that's the right word.
I mean, it's interesting, like in one of the songs on this new record, there's a line that says, "Don't you know consuming doesn't make you exist?" And, obviously there's a lot of truth to that. Like, but I thought actually of getting that lyric put on a tote bag. So then it's on, now I'm selling it on a tote bag. And then I'm like, but wait, am I part of the problem if I'm actually putting that quote of mine on something that's being sold? So it's great.
You're not being sarcastic about a situation you can't get out of, or
this
catch-22.
Well, this brings me to a line in one of your songs where you say you've got to reconstruct the construct for yourself, and I'm particularly interested in it in the context of what we're living through now, and how that line may resonate for you now, perhaps in somewhat of a skewed, modified way.
Right. Well, I think you have to, take what you have and you have to figure it out. You have to make it work for you. And it's, it's not always what you want, but it's how do you deal with it? How are we all dealing with this? It's not, this isn't anything that any of us want to be going through. I have two parents right now that are, battling cancer and going through chemotherapy. I can't see them, but, it's like that thing. You have to figure it out, and you have to make it, you have to make the most of it at this point, right?
Except when you're depressed.
Right.
And after that depression, do you actually, in closing, have hopes for, let us say, the world you know, both the world of artistic production, visual production, and music, and the recording industry in particular, after this pandemic? Do you think some, for lack of a better term, I don't particularly care for it, but some good will come from these dark times?
I think that in art, I think yes, but I think in like the most of humanity, no. I don't really foresee a huge revelation or change in human behavior. I mean, look, like they're already opening up the beaches in Florida. They say, yeah, we're policing them and we're keeping them socially distanced. But most people don't care. A lot of people just they don't care about rules. I mean, I don't love rules either, but when it becomes a situation of trust for your neighbors, make sure that everybody's safe. This is really important. Now, if it deals with my carry-on at the airport is 5 pounds heavier than it should be, well, I don't care. I'm going to try to sneak that carry-on luggage on. It's different. Like this is really serious, right?
For me, when it started, I was hopeful there would be a ray of hope for humanity. But then, when you just look back to a few days ago in Lansing, Michigan, with a bunch of man babies, woman-hating man babies, terrorizing the Capitol, and I will not use the word protest because they weren't. I don't have, there's always, and it's throughout all the time.
I'm wondering if you might indulge our listeners by not singing really, but by saying a few lines from the lyrics of one of your songs.
Geez, you put me on the spot.
Of course, that's my métier.
Actually, what's very interesting that you should ask me that is I've actually been thinking. It wasn't until being shelter in place, kind of locked in, that I have actually been thinking lately about how the lyrics, I never really realized how poetic they are, and maybe of actually just doing some voice recording of just past lyrics. So,
and I think that idea comes from the fact that the exhibition that we have stuck in Memphis right now is called "The One Who Looks Upon the One Who Looks Upon the One Who Looks." And thematically, that two-person show was about, we went with the idea of looking as a concept to start that visual art show because we had not been looking in a basement for so long. One of the items in the show is the lyrics to the song "Don't Reduce Me" on a banner, which is the first time Nicola has ever looked at her lyrics in that way. So I would
say, I'll do that. Here, I'll just do that one. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever get.
Reduced to an image, skin in the game, blurred vision, concealed from the sphere. The one who looks upon the one who looks upon. Reduced to an image, manufactured perfection, blurred vision, concealed from the sphere. Don't reduce me to an image. Don't reduce me to your image.
Adult. Nicola Couperus and Adam Lee Miller. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that someday, in the not too distant future, I tour with you.
Likewise.
Fantastic.
All the best, and thank you so much for taking my call, and take care of each other.
Oh, thank you so much. And you take care too. And everybody out there who is listening, please be safe.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.